daylight. What the hell are you, kid?
When you have a movie series as interesting as the Blade trilogy, little do you think about what could have been done differently because the final products are almost perfect. However, as any process of filmmaking involves planning alternatives and filming some extra footage, there are always some key moments that are left out from the final cut. Sometimes the alternate scenes are deemed unnecessary, and some shorter scenes are thought of as too much of an extension, and the director usually has the final say, especially with legends like David S. Goyer and Guillermo del Toro in charge. In this video, we've brought together all the deleted scenes from the Blade trilogy, as many of them will give you a whole new perspective on the franchise. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Blade, 1998. Deleted footage explored. Blade was Marvel's second big-screen venture after Howard the Duck back in 1986, and it marked a special start to a franchise that's remembered fondly even today. Before the comic book movie boom brought about by X-Men and Spider-Man, there was Blade laying the groundwork. There is some crucial deleted footage from the movie that's worth revisiting. And here, we've compiled some of the major ones, alongside the biggest surprise in the form of a deleted alternate ending. The deleted scene that featured Morbius the living vampire. It might have taken a while for Morbius to have his first big screen debut, but if an earlier plan went as conceived, this debut might have happened all the way back in 1998 with the movie Blade. If you need a little throwback on how the movie ended, we had the vampire hunter and Karen coming onto a rooftop after an epic battle with Deacon Frost. Karen had already cured herself of her infection, and she offered to do the same for Blade, but the latter had regained his bloodlust, and instead of seeking a cure, he asked her to make him a stronger serum. Clearly, he required his superhuman abilities to do his job, and the scene cuts away to Moscow, where Blade can be seen fighting it out with some Russian vampires. The deleted scene that never made the final cut saw an extended version of the rooftop sequence. Here, Blade told Karen to keep the cure to herself because he still had a job to do. Karen revealed that he was on the clock, and a figure was revealed watching them from a nearby building. This was the deadly Morbius, and this was probably an attempt to tease a mouth-watering sequel where the two would come face to face. You can check out this alternate ending online, although the quality of the video is not very impressive. If this had gone ahead, then we would have had Morbius appearing on the big screen even before the first Spider-Man movie shaped up. The original idea to include Morbius belonged to Goyer and Stephen Norrington, but after Norrington left, the idea had to be dropped. Guillermo del Toro was taken on board to direct Blade 2, and he wanted to create something of his own that wouldn't be tied with Morbius. While a sequel with Morbius as the prime antagonist might have been an exciting narrative, we can't complain because Blade 2 is widely regarded as one of the finest films in the Blade franchise. That being said, it would be fun if someone explores the idea someday where Blade and Morbius are brought together. Much like Blade, the vampirism of Morbius is also rather unconventional, and even he struggles to contain his bloodlust. It would definitely be an intriguing tale if the two find themselves fighting each other. A deleted conversation explained the origin of Blade's sword. This could have been a significant inclusion in the movie because the viewers would have known more about the true origin of Blade's sword. There was a deleted conversation from the script that actually explained how the Sword of Blade originally belonged to Whistler, who was also a part of a long line of vampire hunters. This definitely would have been a nice piece of trivia for the viewers, but the director decided against it. A super scary deleted scene. Blade does have its share of chilling moments, but this particular scene definitely deserved a slot in the final cut. This scene is basically an extension of the scene where Karen touches Blade's sword. The original take was a lot scarier, and she went on to discover a strange hybrid infant of some kind floating in a tank. This would have been a major jump scare that would have contained a genuine shock factor. But even though David S. Goyer wanted to keep this scene, the production team felt that it would be a bit too much for the viewers. What's your take on this? Stan Lee's deleted cameo. We are all too familiar with the iconic cameos of Stan Lee in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even this movie was supposed to have one of his fun moments that finally got omitted in the final cut. Stan Lee played the role of one of the cops that came into the Blood Club in the aftermath and discovered Quinn's body on fire. Maybe it was deemed to be unnecessarily dragging the story, but we still believe it would have been a fun inclusion for the fans. We never heard anyone complain about Stan Lee cameos disrupting the flow of some of the finest Marvel movies of all time. An extended deleted scene reveals more about vampires. We might love the lore associated with a movie, but the makers sometimes think otherwise. This makes some of the long conversations that are filmed edited out in the final version of the movie. One such scene in the 1998 Blade movie is an extension of the scene where Karen and Deacon are talking about the cure for vampirism. The original scene intended to answer a few questions about how the vampires would feed if everybody was turned into one. Apparently, as a solid backup plan, they would keep some humans alive in giant blood bags to harvest them. These bags are even seen in the doorway during the scene that you have in the final cut of the movie. It eventually played a key role in the plot of Blade Trinity, and even formed an underlying plot point for the movie Daybreakers from 2009. Relationship dynamics of Karen and Curtis were trimmed down. Both Goyer and Stephen Norrington wanted an extended version of the relationship between Karen and Curtis. They filmed very long conversations between them, but apparently the test audience felt that the scene was getting too dragged before the vampire rises. Eventually, the studio and director struck a bargain, and some parts of the conversation were trimmed out. Blade 2 deleted footage explore. There are some very interesting deleted scenes that never made it to the final cut of the movie, but they still provide invaluable context for the franchise's deep-rooted mythology. Of course, the inclusion of every one of them would have caused the movie to be a bit too long, but some of them surely deserved a place in the final cut. Here, we've compiled all the major deleted scenes that failed to be a part of the movie, but some insignificant minor shots and glimpses that were chopped off during editing have been left out. An extended opening sequence was left out. The first scene that comes to mind is the extended opening sequence that was omitted from the final cut. This scene, set in Prague, provides a good understanding of the European vampire underworld. You can see the shadowy streets of Prague, and this particular deleted scene sets up the dark ambience of the movie quite nicely. The dying and decaying look of the city gives a good insight into the existence of vampires and their impact. The scene shows Blade interacting with the locals before he finds his way into the local vampire hideout where Whistler is held captive. However, the director felt that this scene might slow down the fast-paced nature of the narrative and chose to keep it aside. Extended versions of the fight scene in the warehouse. Blade 2 is known for its unforgettable fight sequences, but there's one that was trimmed down considerably. We're talking about the scene where Blade takes on a couple of vampire ninjas, the vampires who also infiltrate the hideout of Blade in the early parts of the movie. This scene was choreographed by none other than the martial arts legend Donnie Yen, and it was originally quite a long sequence. What the makers decided to leave out was basically an extended sword fight sequence as Blade took on the vampires. The fight scene was a perfect blend of traditional kung fu and modern martial arts, and Blade's fighting skills and adaptive nature were on display as he adjusted to the super speed of the ninja vampires. He was also shown to disarm one of them by using his surroundings, and it highlighted how clever Blade can be even in such tricky situations. Once again, Guillermo del Toro felt that too much of the fight scene might dampen the fluent storytelling, and he made the call of chopping it off in the final cut. Also, he admitted that the effects used for the scene did not please him, as they looked like a video game in some parts.
Like hammered shit.
The flashback scene where Blade first interacts with Whistler. If we had to pick the most important deleted scene of the movie, we would probably go for this one. The scene that shows Blade's first encounter with Whistler. This flashback scene shows a young Blade wandering the streets while struggling to contain his bloodlust. He is still unsure about how to control his bloodlust, and he preys on the homeless and criminals to satiate this irresistible thirst. Such antics make him pop up on Whistler's list, who is already a notable vampire vampire hunter by then. He mistakes Blade for just another vampire at first, but in the course of their encounter, he observes the human traits in him. He realizes that Blade is quite unique and takes him under his wing after realizing that he could be an asset in future vampire hunts. He trains him and guides him to become the famed vampire hunter that he is. In a way, this mentoring of Blade also gives Whistler some purpose in his maddening fight against vampires after his family was killed by them. This deleted scene could have added an emotional depth to the story, but the test audience did not like the overwhelming sentiments of this scene, and it was eventually left out. When Whistler retreats from daylight, the Blade franchise often reminds us that nobody is invulnerable, even if it's an experienced vampire hunter like Whistler. This brief deleted scene shows him retreat into the shadows from growing daylight. It adds more depth to his character, and he is shown to be someone who is still haunted by the nature of his existence, for whom light still remains an enemy. It also sheds light on his internal conflict and reminds us that nobody is spared from the curse of the vampirical nature, even if it's someone with a hardened soul like Whistler. There was a longer House of Pain sequence. If you want to check out the actual longer version of the House of Pain scene that you see in the movie, you have to check out the New Line Platinum Series DVD. The idea behind this scene was to portray the true nature of decay in the vampire society, and the extended sequence that never made the final cut shows the Blood Pack's infiltration of the club, and we get a more detailed look at the layout of the venue. Another impactful part of this extended scene is when Nyssa finds a room upstairs where a man can be seen unpacking human entrails from a bag. The original plan was to feature Michael Jackson for a starry cameo, and the deleted scene could have actually made things more fascinating as viewers would learn about the vampire subculture. An alternate scene that shows Blade's first meeting with Damascanos. This is an alternate scene shot for Blade 2, and it offers a completely different take on the appearance of the vampire overlord Damascanos. Here he can be seen donning a Michael Bolton wig, a term coined by Guillermo del Toro himself, and it has a more conventional styling that suits a vampire overlord like him. It even has a bit of his dark humor that could have added to the lighthearted nature of the narrative. Maybe the reason behind the omission of this scene is simply because it doesn't quite add up to the overall tone and portrayal of Damascanos. A line from Whistler that was removed. This is probably one of the most controversial omissions among all the deleted scenes of Blade 2. But maybe the inclusion would have made for fun banter. The scene shows Whistler crudely remarking about the power of the pussy, and this particular dialogue could have shed more light on his particularly unfiltered nature and rough personality. It was probably filmed in the first place to have a lighthearted exchange in the middle of all the dark and serious stuff, but the director left it out because the test screenings suggested that it might be rather inappropriate. A scene that shows the effects of vampirism on Damascanos. This happens to be yet another extension of a scene that you actually see in the final cut of Blade 2. Here, Damascanos can be seen settling into a monologue that elaborates on the nature of the vampire curse. He reveals that the transformation into his vampire state has changed him gradually, and the only change is not the uncontrollable bloodthirst. It shows how the corrosive downfall eventually corrupts both the mind and the body, and Damascanos tells us about the troubles of his physical body. This is a rather serious sequence that almost makes you feel sorry for the character, in spite of his actual nature in the film. They might have left the scene out of the movie, but it would have offered some food for thought for the viewers who would be left to question if immortality is worth going through the trouble of such change and suffering. Even the director later regretted cutting out this sequence, but he also agreed that such a monologue would have interrupted the natural speed of the narrative. The scene where Chupa plans against Blade in the Blood Pack meeting. Even the vampire hunting team has to deal with complicated internal conflicts, and this particular deleted scene would have revealed more on this matter. It shows Chupa trying to convince the other members of the Blood Pack to act against Blade and hunt the Reapers independently. It reveals his hatred for Blade, and his manipulation tactics also show how weak the alliance really is. The scene would have certainly added more layers to the villainous character of Chupa, but it was removed maybe because the director didn't want to give away the upcoming betrayal in the movie so early. Lighthammer finds out about his Reaper infection. Lighthammer discovers about his Reaper infection in this significant deleted scene, and it's a tense moment that fans deserve to know about. This scene was originally premised after the chaos in the House of Pain, and an extended bathroom sequence shows Lighthammer in front of a mirror as he notices the Reaper virus taking over his body. There are some noticeable changes in his body as the infection takes a strong hold, and Lighthammer's vulnerable side is shown as he realizes the consequences of his condition. It might as well have been included in the final cut because the audience would have gotten to see the change of Lighthammer before they see his ultimate transformation. The final movie narrative only implies that his infection has taken its toll, and when we see his full transformation when he attacks, the final movie narrative only implies that his infection has taken its toll, and we then see his full transformation when he attacks his lover and fellow Blood Pack member. Blade Trinity deleted scenes explore. Among the 3 Blade movies, this one probably is the weakest link, but even so, it still made good money after its release. This promising hit in 2004 did not feature some key scenes in the final cut, but we'll bring them to you here as we break them down. However, the flaws in the movie majorly rise from the studio interference that troubled the making of this film. While there are some insignificant shorter clips omitted out, there is also a major alternate ending that was filmed. Was there an alternate ending in Blade Trinity? Blade Trinity is the 3rd and final installment of the Blade trilogy, and David S. Goyer's prized project sees Wesley Snipes' Blade in an epic showdown to end the vampire-human conflict. This time around, Blade is up against his eternal enemy, Dracula, but even though the movie performed wonders at the box office, the fans were not too happy about the ending sequence. The climactic moments of the movie show Dracula almost overpowering Blade, which leads to him and his human cohorts to release the Daystar virus. This impacts and kills the vampires around them, and even though Dracula could withstand the effects for some time, even he falls to the inevitable. In his dying moments, Dracula appreciates the honorable fight put up by Blade, and as a parting gift, he uses the remainder of his life force to shapeshift into Blade so that the FBI think that Blade is dead. It's not in sync with the pure evil character of Dracula, and there's no feasible reason for him to do Blade any favors in his dying moments. The alternate ending that was planned actually makes more sense. In this alternate version, Blade's body is taken to the morgue after his final encounter with Dracula, and the FBI wants to have the body examined. However, the Daywalker wakes up unexpectedly on the operating slab and starts to fight back against those present there. Lastly, a furious Blade attacks a nurse who cowers for safety, but her fate is left hanging in the balance. The scene then cuts away to Blade riding a motorbike as Hannibal narrates, but the narrative is different from what you hear in the movie. In this version, Hannibal explains that the Daystar virus is unable to kill Blade because of his half-human nature. Somehow, this ending might have been a better alternate, considering the theme and lore of the series. Blade's damper origins were already depicted in Blade 1998, and Blade Trinity goes at length about how Blade can survive in sunlight because of his half-human, half-vampire nature. This shows that even the Daystar virus cannot kill him, even though it can kill normal vampires. Now, with no vampires left to hunt, Blade would probably be forced by his intrinsic bloodlust to hunt humans. It also suggests that there might be some substance in the final words of Dracula, where he remarks about how blood always wins. This deleted ending offers a solid tie-up of several loose ends in the narrative, and we wonder why Goyer decided to go against it for the climax of the generic theatrical cut. Was there a second alternate ending? Another alternate ending is spoken about by the fans, and in this version, there are reportedly a couple of clips that show the vampires to be truly extinct. Now, the Night Stalkers are left to hunt the werewolves that were created from the experiments of the vampires on the wolves. It's not entirely unlikely that for a film as grand as Blade Trinity, more than one alternate ending was planned. Did we almost have a sex scene between Blade and Abigail Whistler? This isn't exactly a deleted scene because the filming was never done, but the original did have such a narrative. Blade was supposed to be physically intimate with Abigail Whistler, played by Jessica Biel, and both David S. Goyer and Wesley Snipes have spoken out about this. Why the scene was never filmed has not been revealed, but maybe it's because the scene would have taken the steam out of the narrative. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on all these deleted scenes across the Blade franchise. Also, tell us which ones, according to you, deserved a place in the final cuts of the movies. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.